Hi, my name is Steve Rahi. I am a cloud solutions architect focused on management technologies. Today's discussion will be part 5 of an ongoing series focused on caching in ConfigMgr Current Branch. So let me interject. This will be focused on the Microsoft Connected Cache portion of delivery optimization, but let me put an asterisk here. So I started this series on caching a while back, and then I did part 4, and I think I mentioned in part 4 that I was keeping it under the header ConfigMgr Current Branch caching because I already had a series going with that. But the whole delivery optimization discussion really isn't a config manager focused discussion. There are things that touch config manager about it. The Microsoft Connected Cache discussion is part of the delivery optimization discussion. This is more tied to config manager just because of convenience, as you'll see in a bit, but just know this is not something that you have to have config manager in order to do, meaning our session today, we're going to focus on how you can implement a Microsoft Connected Cache using config manager, frankly, because it's really easy, right? And something you can do if you have config manager in your environment, really, really easy. There are other options, as you'll see, to implement a Microsoft Connected Cache, so you do not have to be a config manager customer in order to take advantage of the Microsoft Connected Cache, but the discussion here will be in the context of config manager in the Microsoft Connected Cache there. So with that asterisk, let's move on. So here's the agenda for the session, very similar agenda to what we do in all of the sessions that we do like this. So what is a Microsoft Connected Cache? Why Microsoft Connected Cache? And then we'll go through the options and scenarios. We'll really focus the session then on configuring in action how it works with a config manager, a Microsoft Connected Cache that's built as part of the config manager infrastructure. All right. So what is Microsoft Connected Cache? What is it? Well, so Microsoft Connected Cache is the new name for what was initially introduced as DOINC, Delivery Optimization in Network Cache. It's a little bit of a mouthful, right? And Microsoft Connected Cache, a little bit easier to understand. I like the name Delivery Optimization in Network Cache a little bit better because it does, in the title, associate this component as a delivery optimization component. But Microsoft Connected Cache is the new name for it. So when you hear DOINC, if you see DOINC in our logs on the config manager side, which you probably will, in fact, one of the log entries I'll show you, it will be there, right? Then you'll know that that refers to Microsoft Connected Cache. So what is this thing? Well, the whole point, let's just back up a little bit. The whole point of delivery optimization is to allow your clients, your devices, to be able to, people think of it as peer-to-peer. It is. That's a big component, peer-to-peer, be able to have network optimization and get content from peers and so on. There's also the added security component. Again, did the delivery optimization discussion in part 4, so I'm not going to rehash that. The Microsoft Connected Cache is another item. So I showed it in part 4 in the diagram. You'll see that diagram here again in a minute. The Microsoft Connected Cache is that element that allows for having a single source, if you will, for local storage. In other words, think of the Microsoft Connected Cache as a place on your local network where this cloud orchestrated content can be downloaded or provided, and then other devices on your network can reach out to that server as a place for that content versus having to pull it from peers. Now, you can still pull it from peers if you need to. You'll see that. But it is another source that will work with delivery optimization. So it will complement peer-to-peer, right? So, so it works alongside with delivery optimization and complements what you can do with peer-to-peer in the delivery optimization world. Okay, so why Microsoft Connected Cache? Well, already kind of shared why, right? It's another source. It's a local network-based source for making content available that your devices may request. Think of, kind of jumping ahead, think of a distribution point. A distribution point is that source on your network to allow clients that are on your network to be able to have a central location where they can go download content without having to go across the WAN, perhaps to get the content, or go across multiple internal links, maybe on your internal network, whatever. And this is kind of the same thing. So in a delivery optimization world, your clients may be requesting things from the internet they would normally have to download themselves, software updates, maybe Win32 apps, maybe Microsoft Store apps, whatever the case may be, right? And certainly with delivery optimization, as clients start to download that content, they can share it out with others. Here, the Microsoft Connected Cache kind of plugs in alongside all of that, and it is implemented in the config manager world as a part of the distribution point through a distribution point configuration. You'll see that in a minute. And it can also be triggered to download that content and store it locally. So if further clients ask for it, they can go to the Microsoft Connected Cache server as a first opportunity versus peering, if you will. Again, just another way to have a local option for being able to download content, a server-side component, so it's more sized for maybe being able to take multiple connections from devices around your network and so forth, right? And why connected cache in Config Manager specifically is because it's really easy, right? It's very easy to set up. You'll see that in just a minute. And then the benefits you get as a result of setting that up in Config Manager are going to be seen as we kind of work through the demos in a little bit, right? And I will say, kind of as a tangent here as well, you'll see it again in a minute. Just to call it out, Config Manager is one option for implementing a Microsoft Connected Cache. I want to dispel this, as I want to make sure it's clear as we go through this session. Your Microsoft Connected Cache server that you implement with Config Manager in no way means that Microsoft Connected Cache server is limited to Config Manager content. In fact, in the demos that you'll see in a minute, I have specifically used content that is not Config Manager content on that Microsoft Connected Cache server to show you that there is no requirement that the content come from, be part of, whatever it is, Config Manager in any way. Config Manager just simply implements the Microsoft Connected Cache server in a very easy way for you, and then you can take advantage of it in multiple forms, right? Multiple forms. So just to call that out. Again, there are other ways to implement a Microsoft Connected Cache server. You'll see them in a minute. I've read through the documentation on it, and I will tell you that the Config Manager way is the easiest way to implement a Microsoft Connected Cache server, but there are others, right? Network optimization, clearly a part of why we are even thinking about delivery optimization, why we would care to add a Microsoft Connected Cache server on top of what delivery optimization already provides. And then a Microsoft Connected Cache server is local. So your cloud content, things that you might normally have to go out to the internet for, can be made available locally in a very easy way so that you don't have the internet traffic that you otherwise might, right? Okay, so I talked about the options to implement Microsoft Connected Cache. Well, Config Manager certainly is an option. The Config Manager team made it really, really easy to install a Microsoft Connected Cache server. It is installed on top of an existing distribution point or a new distribution point if you want, right? Note, the Connected Cache server cannot be on a site system that has any other role besides a distribution point. It has to be isolated. That doesn't work with the other components, right? You might be able to get it to work, but it's just you shouldn't install it on a site system that has anything other than a distribution point on it, right? There are other ways. So there's a Microsoft Connected Cache server referred to as standalone. It's also the same thing as referred to as an enterprise or an education Connected Cache server. As the time of this recording, that version of the Connected Cache server is in preview. It's in private preview. Should be coming out of that at some point, but the way that's implemented is on a Windows server through the edge for Linux subsystem or component of the Windows Server and so on, right? I'm not going to get into that here. There's also a third option, which kind of is in the mix with standalone enterprise education too, a little bit fuzzy to me on exactly how those are split out. But there's a Microsoft Connected Cache Server that's going to be for ISPs, and it's also currently in private preview. So just calling out the different options here, ConfigMgr from this slide forward will be the focus of our discussion. I'm not talking about the other two. Just know they're out there in case you want them in a non-ConfigMgr environment. If you do have ConfigMgr, trust me, it's going to be a lot easier and straightforward for you to implement this through ConfigMgr, but those other options are out there. Our focus from here will shift to ConfigMgr. Okay, so in ConfigMgr, we're talking about our Microsoft Connected Cache server. So what are the various options that we can focus on for this Microsoft Connected Cache server? And this is what I really want to also call out. So I've already mentioned that ConfigMgr is simply a convenient way to implement the Microsoft Connected Cache server. There's absolutely no requirement that or no limitation that the content that you can use with the Microsoft Connected Cache server implemented through ConfigMgr be purely ConfigMgr content. In fact, we call it out right in our documentation. So if you implement the Microsoft Connected Cache server through ConfigMgr, then really any client can use it. You can have a ConfigMgr only client use it, no problem, right? Just a ConfigMgr managed client. You can have a ConfigMgr Intune co-managed client use it, no problem, right? No problem at all. You can have a cloud only client use it, right? Really any client you can think of, as long as it knows about the Microsoft Connected Cache server, talk about that more in a minute, then it can use it, right? For content, any of the supported content types that are out there. All right. So what are the requirements for setting this up? If you're going to be implementing this through ConfigMgr, you kind of need to have ConfigMgr in order to implement it, right? You need a site system that's going to host your Microsoft Connected Cache. So this can be a server 2012 or better. We list the details here. One key thing, you can read through all this, but one key thing I want to highlight is there is a component in IIS that you need called application request routing, right? Absolutely do not install this feature ahead of time. The installation of the Microsoft Connected Cache server will install and configure the component. If you have it installed and configured, it's going to be probably a place to trip whenever you install this component going onto that site system. So just be aware of that. In fact, as I'll point out here in a minute in the demo, there is an option when you install the distribution point. So the other part kind of embedded in this is a requirement of the site system is it needs to host the distribution point role. And when you configure that distribution point role, there's a checkbox to enable the Microsoft Connected Cache feature. There's also a checkbox there to basically say install IIS if IIS is not already installed. So I just let ConfigMgr manage installing what it needs from IIS, including the application request routing feature. Your clients need 4 gig of RAM and appropriate delivery optimization settings. Right? We'll talk about that. Now, the requirement for 4 gig it's not a blocking thing. In my lab, the clients have less than that, I believe. I can't remember for sure. But let me just say, let's be a little bit fuzzy on that. I don't know if 4 gig is a hard and fast requirement. It probably is a recommendation, something that you need to make sure is there just for performance reasons, if nothing else. I don't recall if we block for less than 4. I don't think we do. Anyway, most devices these days will have 4 gig of RAM, so that shouldn't be a big deal, but just calling that out, right? And in terms of content type, as a reminder, this comes from our session number 4, talking about delivery optimization. These are the different content types that are supported for delivery optimization. I'm not going to read these, right? But what I will point out is when we think about delivery optimization, there are 3 areas that we care about. First, the thing that you primarily think of with delivery optimization is peer-to-peer, right? Having that ability to optimize network bandwidth by the peer-to-peer nature of a caching solution like delivery optimization, or really any caching solution. And we list out the different content type that is supported for peer-to-peer with delivery optimization. Again, some of this, I mean, some things, if you haven't seen the delivery optimization session, please take a look at it because I go through some details a little bit more, right, about why there are only certain content types supported and so forth. The other component is HTTP downloader for content security. So even if you don't have a peer-to-peer benefit, you do have benefits of HTTP download security and so forth. You'll see all of the content types, if they're supported for that or not. And then Microsoft Connected Cache, if the content type is supported for work with the Microsoft Connected Cache. And so on this first page, all of the content types that are shown here are supported across all three. On the next page, that's not true, right? So the ones up top all the way are, but as we get down to things that you don't care about in a corporate environment like Xbox Game Pass, it's not going to be supported for peer-to-peer. Interestingly, it's supported for Microsoft Connected Cache. Things that you might care about with the corporate environment, Windows Package Manager, not supported with Connected Cache, MSIX not supported with Connected Cache, and then this screen that shows you again on the server side the options there, all of them supported for Connected Cache. The device update for Linux IoT, yes, supported for Connected Cache, not supported for peer-to-peer. So again, if you want that network optimization, you can get it with Connected Cache for sure. Okay, so in terms of how this works, here's a slide that you'll recall from the previous session that we did on delivery optimization. This time I want to highlight the Microsoft Connected Cache server, and the flow is a little bit different that I'm trying to illustrate. Another slide here in just a sec will illustrate it as well. So consider the scenario where we have clients that want to request the delivery optimization content, right? And so those clients will, or one of the clients, the first client in line will request it from the delivery optimization service. Just like normal, right? They already know, because I'll show you this in a minute, because they're configured with the Connected Cache detail in their policy and their configuration. They know the Connected Cache server is out there, so they're going to try to reach out to it as a first priority, but they need to figure out the details from the delivery optimization service. So we'll get the CDN delivered to the client when it requests it, as well as information about any other peers on the network, right? Then the client's going to reach out to the Connected Cache server and try to pull the content. If the Connected Cache server doesn't have it, then the client's not going to be able to get it. So that's stop number one. The Connected Cache server is going to go and then be triggered to download the content from the Microsoft CDN because it doesn't have it. And that way, in the future, if other clients request the content, it will have it and be able to serve it up. So since the client's going to go try to find it, so since the Microsoft Connected Cache server didn't have it, it's either going to go get the content from a peer, maybe not all of it, maybe just part of the content, or then it's going to go to the Microsoft CDN to grab. So that's my original graphic modified to try to show you what's going on. But here's another graphic I pulled from our documentation that kind of walks through the same thing. Now this is ConfigMgr specific, right? And so the content here is updates because that's the content that ConfigMgr can work with through delivery optimization. But again, the Microsoft Connected Cache implemented through ConfigMgr is not limited to just the ConfigMgr content at all. So if we follow this, item 1 is the client is going to go and check, or sorry, the clients are configured by ConfigMgr for Connected Cache and delivery optimization. And so they're going to go out and they know that information. Again, I'll show you that. I don't honestly like the way that ConfigMgr configures the clients for delivery optimization and Microsoft Connected Cache. More on that in a minute, right? But in this example, that's happened. And so we're going to go out and get our content for Windows updates. So that's number 1. Number 2, we're going to go out and check, make sure we have the CDN. And then the client's going to check if the cache server already has the information up that they can use. So number 3, so we're going to check with the Microsoft Connected Cache. If it already has the information that it needs to retrieve, then it will download it from the Microsoft Connected Cache. If it doesn't, then step 4, the Microsoft Connected Cache is going to go to the CDN directly and start to download that content, so future requests it will be able to serve. But since we can't serve this one, this client's going to go directly to the CDN as well, or it could be other peers on the network as well, but CDN for sure, and start to pull it down if there is no other source. And then finally, now since we're in the connected cache, we'll be able to service the request as other clients come up, right? So a couple of diagrams just trying to illustrate the point. And the best way to illustrate the point is actually to go through and configure it and see how it works. So there's a couple of components here. Let me pull in the ConfigMgr site server for a moment. All right. So there's a couple of components here. The first is to walk through how to configure the Microsoft Connected Cache through ConfigMgr. Right? The next is to show you or to explain how the Microsoft Connected Cache setting gets implemented on the clients, and also, as part of that, to explain why I don't prefer that. And then third, to show it to you actually working. Now, a note, and this is one of the reasons I don't prefer to let ConfigMgr configure this, right? In ConfigMgr specifically, if you're letting ConfigMgr itself configure the Microsoft Connected Cache settings on the clients, then the ConfigMgr client and the Microsoft Connected Cache server must be in the same boundary group in order for these configuration settings to make it down to the client. If the client is not in the same boundary group, then the setting is just not going to be implemented. That's one of the reasons, again, I don't like it, because while boundary groups are awesome, not every customer uses boundary groups. Large customers don't use boundary groups. So if you're not using boundary groups, then this configuration option available through ConfigMgr isn't going to help you. There's going to be another pathway you need to take to implement the configuration settings. Now, let me be clear. I'm not talking about configuring the Microsoft Connected Cache server. That's fine. Configure the cache server all day long. And that's not a boundary-dependent theme necessarily, right? The configuration of the details as to letting the client know that the connected cache server is out there and so on, that is a boundary group dependent thing through ConfigMgr, though you can go external to ConfigMgr through something like Intune or GPO even, or whatever, and configure that stuff yourself. Anyway, getting a little bit off scope for the moment, let's focus on configuring the Microsoft Connected Cache server. So to do that, if the ConfigMgr console will come forward, okay, let me try to launch it again, not sure. Close the program, yes, and I will launch it again, and hopefully be a bit more responsive. Let's go in, and I'm going to let it launch. I'll come back in the video, and we'll get it set up. Actually, while that's launching, so I actually have the Microsoft Connected Cache server itself configured. Let me just show that to you. So here is the site system I'm using for the Microsoft Connected Cache server, right? I've already got that. It's already configured, as you'll see in a minute. But I just show that to you because it is going to be an external site system that is going to be configured as your Microsoft Connected Cache server. So now that I have the admin console back up and running, let's go through the process. So I'm going to go to site configuration and then servers and site system roles. Now, I've already got my Microsoft Connected Cache server in the console. If I don't, then I'm going to want to go up and create a new site system server, right? And so that process will launch the wizard. You can go through the process and so forth. I've already got it created, no problem. So in my case, I would just go and add a site system role to the server, right? So I would normally add the distribution point role. I've already got it here. Actually, let me go through the process as if I don't have it. Let me just go ahead and add it. Pretend that I'm going to add it to 1. Let's go ahead and add it here. So I'm going to add the site system role. Click through, whatever the settings are you want here. Click through, and then I'm choose proxy or not, and then I'm going to add a distribution point role. Right? Distribution point. And now I'm using this server as an example. The server that you actually put it on needs to be one that doesn't have any components on it at all yet, right? Just needs to be loaded in. And so next, I'm going to go ahead and decide, hey, if I don't have IIS configured already, let ConfigMgr configure it. That's what I want to do because ConfigMgr knows exactly how it needs to configure this. And then enable this as a Microsoft Connected Cache server. I'm going to approve that I have the right license and click Next. Choose the details here of how I want to communicate and click Next. And then I am going to want to decide the drive option. So in my lab, I don't have huge drives. I don't need them. And so, I might specify this might be okay. I do have a couple of gigabytes free on my drives. Whatever I want to do, might want to make it less, doesn't matter. I just want to have something I can show you how you want the um, connected cache to be configured in terms of the primary content location, whether you want to let ConfigMgr choose, you want to specify whatever the other detail, whatever, right? Now, one thing to understand, these settings, this might be interesting. These might be interesting, and I want to call these out because this really is not a connected cache configured setting really at all. Neither is this, right? You might think it is, but one thing about the connected cache, if you install it, it will install a distribution point, a standard distribution point. The connected cache will be in addition to that, right? So it will create its own folder, it will have its own content, right? But it's out there. I'll call this out again later, but if you do the no SMS on drive option, then the connected cache installation will respect that, right? And so on. So all of those options apply. And then next, you'll just go through the rest of the wizard and take all the defaults, and your server will get installed. So my server is installed here. No problem at all. So the way that I know that the server is installed, well, first of all, I can look in the UI. If I go under monitoring and I go to distribution status and I go to distribution point configuration status and I'll look at my Microsoft Connected Cache, then I can go up and certainly I can see some of the just general details again, because this is a distribution point, a full distribution point. Then if I go to the details tab, then you'll see the different configuration options as happened to this. And one of these will be DOINC, delivery optimization in network cache, was successfully set up. So I can tell from my status of my distribution point that this was actually set up okay. The other thing that I can do is I can go to my logs. Right? We love our logs. And I know that this one's in the older log, so I'll pull that up. And there's a couple of things that I can search for. So again, our logs don't always get updated with the latest name of the component, so I'm just going to look for DOINC. And so it'll tell me that I'm, let's see, I'm going to look for another version of that. So you'll see that it's updating and so on. Let's see if I can find setup DOINC. Okay. Created setup DOINC thread, and it's starting, and then you'll see some different things about enabling the DP and setup DOINC thread started, enabling distributing DOINC to the drive. Here's the details, the percentage done, blah, blah, blah. Here's a reference to a PowerShell command that will run. And so that's really interesting to know that the setup of DOINC is done by PowerShell. And so here's the directory where the PowerShell command is launched from and the command line. So install.ps1 is what drives the install of the delivery optimization server. And you can finish this through the distribution point log, no problem, and see that it's finished doing what it needs to do. And so I'll take this out of the way. And then the other thing you need to do is make sure that your site or the Microsoft Connected Cache is installed. You can validate that it is, you can see that it is, and so forth. So let me pull back in the Microsoft Connected Cache server for a moment, and we'll get our first look at the drive. So I mentioned that the Connected Cache server is a standard distribution point. It is, sorry, that's the D drive. It is, so it will install both the distribution point and the connected cache components. So here are our standard distribution point components, right? Here, here, and here. We do have this, right? We have this as well as standard distribution point folder. Here's the delivery optimization stuff. Here's also delivery optimization stuff, right? And so this is the folder for where we will find the install of the I say delivery optimization server, delivery optimization in network cache, the Microsoft connected cache, so DOINC, right? So DOINC install, right? We'll see that. We'll also go into this folder because this was referenced in the distribution point manager log, and we'll see the install is here. We'll also see the DOINC setup, and this is the log that is created by this PowerShell script. So if you are running through this, so the first time I ran through it, I had an error because my drives were too small for what I had configured, right? So this, I adjusted that, and come on down, and we'll see the indications that the install was successful. So here, install succeeded. The 3010 status as a result, meaning I just need to reboot, which I did, and then the install completed successfully. So I am fully set up. Everything is running now, no problem. If I want to explore this a little bit, I have under the SMS DP dollar, I'm in this DOINC or the Microsoft Connected Cache setup. I have various things that I can look at here. I can also go back a little bit. I can get to my SMS logs and see different things, right? I can go up to my folder if I want to. I can look inside the folder. I can look at the DOINC product itself and some of the install things and logs and different things. But the major thing that you would care about is what I've shown you in terms of the logs itself, where you can show that it's healthy and so forth, right? So a little bit of a preview, because I've already got some content downloaded here. So if I go to this folder, this will show me nothing. Whenever I first install it, it will be a folder. There will be nothing in here. I've actually got some things in here because I have actually downloaded some content into the Microsoft Connected Cache. That's what this is, right? So if you see content in here, that's because it is a functioning Microsoft Connected Cache that someone, somewhere, some device on the network has requested content from, and so it's being stored in here, right? Okay. Now, the next part, that's setting up the Microsoft Connected Cache. Now you need to actually enable the clients to use the Microsoft Connected Cache. I'm going to show you the config manager way, right? So I showed you how to do it. Come on, launch. I showed you how to do it with in the delivery optimization session, how to create the configuration options and so forth, right? And so to quickly go over this again, I'll show you where you do that in Config Manager. It is absolutely not required that you use Config Manager to enable these settings. It's here if you want to, but it's not a requirement. I don't actually prefer to do it this way, for a variety of reasons. But the point is, you have it installed, you're good. Now you go up to client settings, or down in this case to client settings, and there's an option for you. So in the previous session, I showed you how to enable delivery optimization settings by setting this to yes. Now, if you want your Config Manager client to use the Microsoft Connected Cache that you've configured, you can set this to yes. And if your Microsoft Connected Cache is in the same boundary group as your clients, they will get the settings for the Microsoft Connected Cache server. So in my case, go up to hierarchy, you'll see that in my boundary group, I have my lab boundary group. Go to properties on it. My Microsoft Connected Cache server is in here. My boundaries are the lab boundaries. So yes, my clients are on the same boundary group as my Microsoft Connected Cache, and that's why they have the settings. Let me pull a client up just to show you real quick. So if I look in, so the way Config Manager implements these settings is through local policy, right? That's another reason that I prefer not to use config managers. We're really, in the modern world, trying to get away from using group policies. Yes, local policy is not technically using group policies, but it's a local policy. So it's not using domain policies, it's using the local policy, but still, trying to think in terms of getting away from policies and using something like MDM. I prefer to use Intune as a way to implement my delivery optimization settings. Showed you that in the previous session. But if you use ConfigMgr, it will implement this through local policy. And here's where it does it. And this is another reason. So here's the two options and the only two options that you get enabled when you turn on delivery optimization through ConfigMgr, right? This is the third option that you get enabled if you enable Microsoft Connected Cache through ConfigMgr. There's a whole bunch of settings here that you likely want to configure beyond just these three. Right? That's another reason that I don't prefer ConfigMgr as the configuration route for this. If you know you're going to have to put in different settings in addition to this anyway, then why not just do all of the settings in that one place versus having some settings set here, another set of settings set in another place anyway. But if you do use ConfigMgr, this is the specific setting that is configured by Microsoft Connected Cache implementation. And these two are the specific settings that delivery optimization will configure. So just to complete this whole thing, right, to look at how this is implemented through the setting, right, you can look in the registry. And so here's the path, right, local machine software, policies, Microsoft Windows delivery optimization. If you are setting it through policy, the result will be that these settings show up in the registry at this location, right? These same three settings are the ones you just saw. Now, not to confuse the issue, but if you are setting this through something like Intune, right? Intune uses a completely different registry key for documenting the settings that it's introducing onto the device. So just to tie a bow around that, there's not going to be any settings there, but just to show you. So let's see. Software, Microsoft, and then Policy Manager. So Policy Manager here. This is the key for MDM, not Intune specifically, just MDM. And then here are all of the default policies that are in place on the device. Don't get mired down in that because these are the default settings, but if you are setting something, then it will be under current. And in my case, I have device, or it could be user if you're sending user settings. And then here are just the different device settings I put down. So there's no delivery optimization here because delivery optimization is being configured through local policy. But if I had delivery optimization configured through MDM, as I showed you in the previous session, it would be here, right? It would be here. Anyway, hope that tangent didn't confuse anything. I'm just trying to be complete for you as we go through this. And so that's configuring delivery optimization, right? Now, what about actually seeing this in action? So for the in action part of this, I told you at the beginning that I'm really trying to show how you can use ConfigMgr to easily build the Microsoft Connected Cache server that you can use, but that the Microsoft Connected Cache server in no way is limited to just ConfigMgr content, right? Or content configured and deployed through ConfigMgr, which would be only software update content. So in the lab, I have ConfigMgr clients, right? Just because it's convenient. I showed you one of them. But the content that I'm going to deploy has nothing at all to do with ConfigMgr. In fact, I just went to the Microsoft Store and downloaded some content. Specifically, the content I'm using is a little app called Candy Crush Soda Saga. It's the whole Candy Crush usage was kind of described in our documentation for delivery optimization itself for some testing. So I just added on to that. I'm using Candy Crush Soda Saga with my ConfigMgr clients with the specific desire to illustrate that there is no requirement for the content to come from ConfigMgr for the Microsoft Connected Cache to work. So let me bring in a couple of clients. I'll bring in 3. And here's the first one. The way that I did this in my lab, you'll see when I get logged in that Microsoft or that Candy Crush Soda Saga is present on the device. Well, as soon as I can get this thing to be responsive, I'll click on it. There we go. Candy Crush Soda Saga is up here. So the way I did this, I have 3 devices. This one is my first one. There's another one in the middle and then the third one. So I started with this one, knowing that there would be no content on my peers with Candy Crush Soda Saga, nor would there be any content in the connected cache, right? And so I wanted to use this as kind of the lead machine to download from. Now, since then, my lab has been around a little bit, and so there's been a little bit more activity and different things. So when you see the numbers, it won't reflect that this just purely has downloaded from the internet, but that's the way I started, right? So this is number 1. So let me show you what I did on this for a minute. Sorry, let me minimize. I think I accidentally forwarded the slide I did. I'm trying to get to my notes to make sure I do this in the right order. So this one, let me pull that back up. Right. So let me just show you real quick that the results, right? So Candy Crush Soda Saga is here. I just showed it to you, right? Downloaded from the Microsoft Store, just here. And so the easy way to look and see how effective delivery optimization in general has been, and then also how effective your downloads from the Microsoft Connected Cache server have been, is to look at Activity Monitor. Now, before I show you the numbers, I'll just tell you, well, first of all, this client, you wouldn't expect to have hardly anything from Microsoft Connected Cache, really, because it was the lead device. Like I said, and since that time, there's been a little bit of time that this system set around. So the numbers are not 0 for Microsoft Connected Cache. But anyway, you'll see. The other thing, the numbers you're going to see here, you're probably going to look at and think, yawn, that's not really great. It's not worth investing your time in, whatever. And just a reminder, this is my lab. It is a 3-machine lab. In a production environment, these numbers would be far better. We talk about in our documentation that at Microsoft, we see 75% network utilization reduction by using a combination of delivery optimization, probably a Microsoft Connected Cache, whatever, right? But the easiest way to see is to look at Activity Monitor. And so you'll see the percentage of downloads that have come from Microsoft. You'll see the percentage from Microsoft Cache Server, which it does have, in this case, 18%, right? So that's definitely more. It was 0 whenever I first downloaded Candy Crush Soda Saga. From PCs on my local network, none, right? Because this is the lead PC. So now that it's in the cache, it is in connected cache, so it's able to do whatever it needs to do. With connected cache, maybe there was an app update, I don't know, right? But there you go. And then from PCs on the internet. So this is a really good graphical way to see what's going on. The other thing that you would want to verify and validate, so you're using Microsoft Connected Cache. The Microsoft Connected Cache server will have the content. I already showed you earlier where the content is there. I'll show it to you again. But the other thing, that using Microsoft Connected Cache does not mean that you're not also going to be able to use just peer-to-peer and delivery optimization. So let's just look in the cache here and confirm that, in fact, we do also store this in the delivery optimization cache that we can serve out to other PCs on the network. And so just scrolling down into there, in fact, we do have content in the cache. So this is that Candy Crush Soda Saga that I downloaded. It's the only thing I've downloaded to this PC, so I know it's there. All right, so let's go to number 2 inline and see what its metrics are. So in theory, this would be the system that I then downloaded Candy Crush Soda Saga to secondly. And so the idea would have been that we would have gotten a portion from the Microsoft Connected Cache, there it is, and then others maybe from peers on the network or direct download. So let's just see what happened. So again, these numbers might be a little bit messed up because this has been around for a little bit. So yeah, so here we're getting it from Microsoft, the majority from Microsoft Connected Cache. We got a little bit from other PCs in our network, right? So you do see a little bit of activity. What is our upload statistics to PCs on the internet? What is upload PCs on the network? You know, whatever, right? You'll see that down there if it's applicable. And then finally, we have number 3, which would participate in all this. And it, in theory, would have been the third one to go. And so it would have had the highest hit rate in theory. Might not be today. I think it actually still is. But, you know, like anything, over time, these numbers will change and so forth. So here we get 30% from the Microsoft Cache server, 70% from direct download, and so forth, right? So again, very artificial in my lab, very, very artificial, but still trying to illustrate how things will, in fact, work. Let me show you, again, just kind of as a reminder, on the Microsoft Connected Cache server itself, we do have the content that was downloaded there. So again, the flow is that here's the delivery up to, or the Microsoft Connected Cache folder. Here's the content that was downloaded. So again, when I first installed this folder was empty. It only gets content when it downloads that content from the internet because it was triggered to do so. So as a reminder to tie it all together, the flow is that a client needs the content. The client is configured with the Microsoft Connected Cache server. I showed you where. The client then tries to contact the Microsoft Connected Cache server for the content. It doesn't have it, perhaps, and so then the client goes to the internet and downloads it. But because the client tried to get it from Microsoft Connected Cache and Microsoft Connected Cache didn't have it, Microsoft Connected Cache will then also download it. So the next time a client asks for it, it will be there, right? So that's kind of the flow of events, how things happen. Again, using Microsoft Connected Cache does not at all prevent the device from being active in the delivery optimization realm as well, and peering and all of those things that go along with delivery optimization. The same PowerShell commandlets to review the activity of delivery optimization, the status of your cache, your performance, etc. All of those still apply that I talked to you about in the last session, right? So Microsoft Connected Cache really is just that additional piece that works alongside delivery optimization to just add extra efficiency, right? Okay, so starting to wrap up the session in terms of troubleshooting tips and tricks. So troubleshooting, I showed you the logs. The distribution point logs will help you see if, in fact, the Microsoft Connected Cache is installing, if it's successful, etc., getting installed. Just a reference in that log is doink. It's not Microsoft Connected Cache, it's doink that you would search for in that log. And then once the setup and process starts, once the distribution point's loaded, once the Microsoft Connected Cache piece is triggered, then you'll be able to look at the distribution point and look at the doink setup log on that system and see the process, see if it's installed successfully, whatever, right? I already mentioned that the cache server, the Microsoft Connected Cache server, is implemented through the distribution point properties, as I showed you. It sits alongside the distribution point, so you'll have a standard distribution point installed, and then the Microsoft Connected Cache sits alongside it. So just know that's the case. I did mention as well that Microsoft Connected Cache will honor the no SMS on drive, so no _SMS _on _drive.sms all caps file. If you don't want a particular drive to be used for Microsoft Connected Cache or whatever distribution point, put that flag file out there, and that drive will be skipped whenever we're trying to evaluate the best drive to use for configuring these things. And folks, that really is it. We'll wrap the session there. Wanted to include the discussion of Microsoft Connected Cache. Think it will really provide some additional value to you for your on-prem clients, right? If they're trying to use delivery optimization and really optimize the way they use the network, then a combination of delivery optimization and adding Microsoft Connected Cache really helps with that. So with that, we will wrap up the session and we will see you next time.